We're going to be doing Lions coverage all season here, all off season, because there's always going to be stuff to talk about. Just like this week, the main conversation point is the offensive coordinator search that's been made a little bit more complicated, Billy, by the fact that now there's a lot of, I think it's 28% of the league needs a head coach. So I always compare it to musical chairs, and then the music stops and you hope you get the right person sitting in the right chair. But that's the big conversation piece this week. So I'm curious what you think of the offensive coordinator search so far, and maybe the Lions season as a whole. Maybe that's where we should start, because the Lions, are we overreacting a little bit to a team that went 9-8, beat their division rival, the Bears, who now are maybe making a run in the playoffs? I don't know if we want to sound the alarm too much, but they're also going to be trying to fill in some of these gaps, starting with the offensive coordinator and then some of the holes on the field. But where do you lie with the season as a whole here?
Yeah, for sure. First off, thanks for having me. Great to be back on with you guys.
Definitely.
It's been a while. Great to talk to you. The offensive coordinator search obviously is going to be a big story here in Detroit. Like you said, it's there's a lot of openings, which is pretty crazy. The news came out earlier today that they're going to be that they're potentially looking at Arthur Smith, the former, I think we can assume, former offensive coordinator of the Steelers, now that Mike Tomlin stepped down. Smith, he certainly, his offenses are kind of meh. I know they're not very exciting, and I don't know if that would be a great fit here in Detroit. I'm sure, obviously, the bigger names like the Mike McDaniels in the world. I think Mike McDaniel certainly would be interesting. We know he's a brilliant offensive mind. We know things kind of tampered off a little bit in Miami, and that's what led to him being fired. But we know his offenses can be very exciting. I think he could work with a guy like a Jared Goff, get him the ball, just let him get the ball to his playmakers. And I think, we saw the run game with Devon Achane in Miami. He became one of the better running backs in the league. I'm really curious. I'd be really curious to see what he could do with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, and especially if David Montgomery kind of starts to go off to the side, so to speak. They finally get let Gibbs be that true number one. I think the sky's the limit for him, and with someone like McDaniel, I think that'd be really, really fun to watch. I think if they end up landing, and obviously McDaniel's going to get some head coaching interest, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
That's the part that I was going to hit next, because he does seem like a guy that maybe would need to take a step back down to go back up, that he would be eligible to go back up in a year or two. So then you got to factor that in if you're the Lions and say, okay, if we get this guy and he's as successful as we want him to be, then is he going to necessarily be there for very long, or is he going to want to be part of a head coaching? Is he going to want to be a head coach somewhere else in the league, because that's ultimately probably where he wants to go again? The other part of the Mike McDaniel thing, I talked about this with our analyst last week. I'm just not sure of the fit with McDaniel and Campbell. I know people are a little bit more confident in this than me. Jeff just lit his mic up, so I'm going to want the opinion of both you guys here. Billy, what do you think of this fit with McDaniel? Because I don't know what the scale is, but I've been looking at a college or a head coach scale, a spectrum in the NFL, where Campbell's kind of at one side. I don't want to call it toughness, but there's an authenticity element. There's a bunch of things, and Campbell's kind of at the one side. And I've always viewed the other side of the scale as Mike McDaniel. And it's a lot of different things encompassed there, but I just don't know if they would fit. I could see it something being in like an odd couple scenario where they fit in that way, and he gives Campbell what he needs. I could also see it being a former head coach coming back down to offensive coordinator and then not meshing with an established culture-based head coach. So I'm curious where you lie on kind of that spectrum of potential results between those two specifically.
Yeah, no, I think you make an incredible point there. I fully agree with that, because we know Mike McDaniel certainly likes to be, if you want to say buddy with players, whereas Dan Campbell, he can obviously be a good guy, but when he needs to be tough and run a tight ship, he absolutely does. So I think that's a great point. I think you also brought up a really great point too, in terms of, is this like a 1-year stopgap, right? Would McDaniel take this job to kind of resurrect himself, so to speak, give him a 1-year break from head coaching, and then get back into the cycle in 2027? We obviously see coaches do that very often. We might see that with a guy like Robert Saleh, who took a year, went back to defensive coordinator, had a great year, may end up getting another head coaching gig next season. So I think we could be on that path if he wants to go. So I think that possibility is very realistic. And again, I think you brought up, I love the odd couple thing there. I think that's a great way to put it, because you're right. These two guys certainly have very differing personalities. Can their offenses mesh together? Will Campbell take on kind of McDaniel's style? Will McDaniel be good with Dan Campbell's aggressiveness? I think that would be really intriguing to watch if that were to happen.
I agree. And I mean, that's the juxtaposition between him and Morton is interesting to me, because Morton was kind of maybe extending the wrong part of Dan Campbell, and he was a little older school. Jeff, I'm curious about your take on this, because you've been following this, and it is, I could see it really going either way. That's why I'm throwing it out to you guys. I don't really have a formed opinion. I like to get I like to get opinions from experts like Billy and talk it out with people like you. But I mean, we know they're not going to be sharing each other's sunglasses. I know that, but other than that, how do you think this is going to go?
No, you said exactly what I was going to say. This would be truly the odd couple. It really would. So the interesting part to me is Mike McDaniel. He's only 42 years old. So I believe it would be definitely either one, maybe if we got lucky, 2 years. But how smart is he? He looks smart. Everyone says he's smart. He's an offensive genius. The smart thing for me is go to Detroit, build your name back up, get that Miami stink off you, and then go back out you're 42 years old. I mean, to get back in as a head coach at 44, and probably with a better selection of teams right now. I mean, you go to Cleveland, you go to Tennessee, you're just going to get buried. To me, this is the smartest move. And if he's as smart as he looks and it's the way he talks, it's got to be Detroit. And yeah, it would be fun to see if these two would. Can you imagine, sharing outfits and stuff like that? The style is so outrageously different. If he stood on the sideline too next to Campbell, being 5'8", 5'9", and Campbell being so big, that would be even better.
Exactly. As somebody that's 42, I appreciate you saying only 42. As somebody that's also 42, like McDaniel. But no, I really could see this either way. One of the reasons I brought this up to you guys is because I want to compare it to another open position. I'm under the impression that he's not going to be able to get a head coaching gig in this cycle. I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's in the discussion, but I think there's probably enough other people to fill the chairs here of the up and coming coaches, and they'll take a chance at somebody that hasn't been a head coach. And as Jeff said, kind of take a year or two, get your reputation rehabilitated, and then move back up. But the other job out there that is competitive, so I think the Lions are one of the best jobs. It's not subjective to the local market. One, objectively, one of the best jobs for an offensive coordinator. The other one is the Eagles, because they have a lot of built-in pieces there. It's a little bit more tumultuous there. It's a different situation where the culture is maybe not as strong, but they have a lot of different options. But I'm curious, Billy, how you see the difference in fit, because it seems like he'd get along with Sirianni better than Campbell. So if he's sitting in one of those interviews, I don't know which one he'd get along better. He seems more like he'd fit in with kind of the swagger of Sirianni, but do they clash because they're not an odd couple? That those two jobs being put up next to each other, where the Eagles have come out and said, hey, our two top choices right now are Mike McDaniel and Brian Dable, who are different from each other and an odd couple in their own right. I don't know how to take those two jobs being open at the same time. How do you see that?
Yeah, I agree. I think this. I think that would be really intriguing. I know there's certainly a lot in the Eagles world that would love Mike McDaniel as well. And I think if he does take the Philadelphia job, I feel like he would have more control over the offense in Philadelphia than he would in Detroit, because we know Nick Sirianni is kind of that CEO type coach, right? He kind of lets his, depending on the flow of the season, certainly. But you look at the last few years, specifically the 2 years that they went to the Super Bowl. He kind of stayed back because he knew he had an offense coordinator that was able to get it done, right? 2022 was Shane Steichen, 2024 it was Kellen Moore, and then the years that they bottomed out in the playoffs, the offensive coordinator struggled. You look at this year, Kevin Patullo just never got it done, and we saw the end result. So I think with McDaniel, I think certainly the Eagles are looking for that kind of veteran offensive mind to really kind of unlock guys like Jalen Hurts, guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, all those guys, and really kind of get them back to that elite status that they had last season when they won the Super Bowl, right? And I think McDaniel could be that guy to kind of unlock that potential. They certainly have to fix the offensive line, get themselves healthy again there. As far as clashing, you're talking about two guys that both can kind of be buddy-buddy. We know Sirianni can be kind of a weird, but in a good way, if that makes sense. And McDaniel, I think, is sort of that same style. So I think that would be a fascinating pairing if McDaniel were to go to Philadelphia from that standpoint.
The personalities involved in this are very interesting to me. We spent longer on McDaniel than I expected, but that's going to be one of the biggest names, and I think I could see him going to one of those two teams. So then that chair gets filled. Then the other job kind of becomes that top job to go to as an offensive coordinator as of right now. But you've got to wait for the aspiring head coaches, because that's kind of the chess game you're playing too, because the aspiring head coaches are going to wait. Sure, that's a good offensive coordinator job, but if they think they can leave their current job that's propelled them to a potential head coaching job, they're going to go there first and take those interviews. So we'll talk about some of the other candidates here after the break, because there's some other ones in the mix, and I want to get Billy's overall take of the Lions heading into next season. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.
From the Scully Statewide Moving Studios.
Country with a Twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
McDaniel's certainly an interesting guy. We were still talking about him in the break, but I'm curious about some of the other names that kind of stick out to you. I have a couple. There's some that have been requested. We're trying to figure out kind of who has been requested, like we were talking about in the previous segment. You got to wait for that head coaching stuff to kind of the carousel to stop there to interview some. But then also, if you wait too long, then maybe your guy's being hired by somebody else. But are there some other guys that stick out to you as potential fits that you'd like to see in Honolulu Blue on the sideline?
Yeah, there's a couple names here. Yesterday they interviewed Mike Kafka, the former offensive coordinator of the Giants, interim head coach. Was there for 4 years. The Giants' offense certainly had their ups and downs. Injuries played a part, but I think we saw last year with an intriguing quarterback. We were excited to see Jackson Dart, and he had his moments. And we saw the really good running of Cam Scadaboo. So I think you pair Kafka with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that could be interesting to watch. Jake Peets, pass game coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, another interesting name I think here because we saw how good the Seahawks offense was. It was another kind of chance on Sam Darnold, paying him all that money, and it paid off big time. Sam Darnold had one of the best, if not the best, seasons of his career. Certainly helped any other guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba to throw to, but Jake Peets certainly a part of that. Certainly helped get that passing game. And we know Seattle, they were a team that had to run the ball a lot under Pete Carroll, but now with this new staff, you're really starting to see them really kind of air it out a little bit more. Not extensively, but enough that it was definitely explosive at times. And I think you could certainly have that in Detroit with Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. So I think Pete's is another intriguing name there. And then they also interviewed Zach Robinson, former offensive coordinator of the Falcons, but there's certainly question marks there too because there's talent on that Falcons offense, and they just never kind of really got it going. Outside of Bijan Robinson, obviously, and again, injuries at the quarterback position to Michael Penix, and Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins, so that's kind of a coin flip, but at least he'd certainly have, again, plenty of talent to work with in Detroit. If he can get Jahmyr Gibbs going like he did Bijan Robinson, then, who knows what can happen there. I think, you could be looking at, Gibbs at 1,200 rushing yards. Maybe he goes for 1,600 if they just keep getting him the ball. You could even say 2,000 all-purpose yard or 2,000 total yards. Excuse me. If he just keeps giving them the ball like he did with Bijan. So those are a couple of the names. Again, we touched on Arthur Smith at the beginning, but I know a lot of people certainly have their reservations about him as well. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do if any of these guys start to rise up more as candidates. And these are certainly guys that I don't think you have to worry about getting head coaching gigs. So, the seat is certainly open for these guys if they want it in Detroit.
Robinson and Kafka are the two that I was going to highlight. So I'm glad you hit on those. Robinson is one of those guys that you feel like that should be good on paper to a degree. He was with the Rams. He was underneath a bunch of guys, not only in the McVay tree, but now a bunch of guys that have become head coaches in their own right. Liam Cohen, a couple other guys there with the Rams. But I think that's going to come down to, I think the biggest part of that probably isn't even going to be the interview. I got to think it's going to be Jared Goff's opinion of him, because he played with him for 1 year with the Rams. And like you said, he's got a little bit of a questionable history with what we know are talented quarterbacks. Goff didn't have a great year when he was part of the coaching staff and his quarterbacks coach. Stafford also didn't have his best year, and now he's having some of his best years of his career with the Rams after that as his age accelerates. Then you've got him with the Falcons, clearly talented offensive team. Yes, it was hard to get the quarterback continuity with an aging Kirk Cousins and an injured Michael Penix Jr. But between all of those, it's like I want to like that as a choice, and I think I could work my way into it if they do end up with him. But I can see that going either way. I think the coin flip was the best way to describe that. And then I like Kafka. That's a guy that's interesting to me. And anybody that's questioning, well, okay, the Giants didn't have a great offensive year this year. Why are we so high on him? They elevated him to interim coach. That's usually a good sign, good vote of confidence. It's always funny to me that you can't really be interim head coach and then get hired to be the head coach. It happens occasionally, but it doesn't happen very often. So he's in that position. So now he's probably on the open market. But anybody that's questioning his ability to call the game, he's had a lot of injuries, and just watch that Lions game, because he was the offensive coordinator for the Lions-Giants game this year. And that was one of the best called games that I've seen against them, even if they did have some defensive struggles on their own end.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, you know, and Kafka, he learned from the best, right? He worked under Andy Reid for a few years in Kansas City. Obviously played a couple years with the Eagles. The guy's smart. The guy knows what he's doing. Like you said, there were injuries. I mean, it's tough to, and with all due respect to guys like, you know, Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton and some of those guys, the Giants didn't really have anybody that struck fear in opposing defenses, right? You know, once Malik Neighbors went down with that injury, things just tailed off for them. But, you know, they still were treading water, and that's due to the leadership of Mike Kafka. And like you said, you know, it's a good sign that he was the one that was given the interim gig. So, yeah, he may not be the flashy name, but I think he can come in, he can, you know, work well with Jared Goff, work well with this offense, and I think he'd be kind of an underrated hire, and I think he would work well with Dan Campbell here.
I agree. Another guy that was an interim head coach that wasn't a ballyhooed interim head coach, had to work his way back up again, and then got the job with the Lions. Wasn't really a high profile hire at the time, but has worked out well. So I could see that pairing worked. There's a lot of different possibilities here, but that was one that stuck out to me after that Giants game, because like you said, Neighbors was out, Scadaboo was out, you had Jameis Winston as the quarterback, Jackson Dart was out. All the pieces that he was working with well, that were younger guys, first, second year guys, those guys all went down, and he was doing a pretty decent job with some pieces that talent-wise, like you said, no offense to those guys, it's next man up, but talent-wise, we're kind of one of the lower-rated groups in the NFL with what they were working with by the end of the year. So it'll be interesting to follow. We'll be following the offensive coordinator search on the show, but I'm just curious what your off-season wish list is here for before we get you out of here. Just the idea of what are we looking for on the Lions side of things? Who do you see them moving on from? What are some of the needs to address in draft and free agency? I know that's a long. There's a lot of different answers to that question, but what are some of the kind of quick hitting things that kind of come to your mind first?
Got to shore up the offensive line, and not just interior, but we could be talking bookend as well. You know, what's the status of Taylor Decker? He sounded like a guy that could be hanging up the cleats at some point. So you got to figure out the left tackle position. You know, whether that's sign someone or draft someone, put them there, move Panay Sewell, whatever the case may be. But got to get a tackle, got to get interior taken care of as well. Graham Glasgow is not going to be there forever. You got to figure out what you're going to do at the center position. Fortunately, one of the guard positions is pretty locked down, I think, now. Tate Ratledge, the rookie, had a very good season, really kind of settled into his own. They worked him at center a little bit preseason, moved him to guard, and he really settled in. That was more of his natural position anyway. The other guard, though, I don't know. Christian Mahogany was kind of up and down. He had some injuries, so some question marks there. Defensively, got to figure out what you're going to do at the edge position. As great as Aiden Hutchinson is, he can't do it all, and that was where it was a pleasant surprise to see a guy like Al-Qadim Muhammad really step up and have a fantastic season. 11 sacks, 59 pressures. He's a free agent. You could argue that he is the priority free agent here for the Lions on defense. And then Alex Anzalone, got to get him. We got to try to get him back in the mix as well, because him and Jack Campbell, what a group that was, especially Campbell. That was at least now that's a really good core piece now to build around on the defense. But I think it'd be good to get Anzalone back in as well. And then cornerback depth, got to figure that out as well. And Meek Robinson, Rockison, both free agents. So you got to figure out, especially a guy like Robertson, because he was kind of that do-it-all guy, right? He can play outside, he can play inside. He was the one that really stepped up when all these injuries were coming through throughout the secondary. And then certainly, just got to figure out what you're going to do without Brian Branch, right? What are you going to do at the safety position? Because you're obviously not going to see Brian Branch for quite some time, really. I mean, the timing of that injury obviously was brutal. He's at most, I should say, questionable for the start of the season. I mean, you're probably not going to see him till October, maybe November. So really going to be interesting to see, because once those guys went down, him and Kirby Joseph, once they went down, things just the wheels just fell off, right? So really going to be interesting to see how they address the safety position this offseason as well.
That's one of the sneaky ones here, because it's a safety-based defense to a degree. They've kind of built it around the talents of those two, and like you said, you saw the back end kind of drop off when the back end dropped off there, and you've got those names that you mentioned. I mean, even if they re-sign three of the guys that could be in the mix here, Avonte Maddox, Amik Robertson, and Rocky Sin, you still have some work to do. Those are veteran guys that played pretty well, especially at stretches here. And so you've got to get those guys potentially back in the mix, and then still get some depth pieces, because you hit it on the head. Branch isn't going to be back for a little while, and you don't know what's going on with Joseph's knee, at least right now. And it's hard. It's going to be hard to be confident in that when the season starts, even if he's looking healthy. So and obviously the offensive line and the defensive end position were arguably needs last year. They tried to address the offensive line piece. That was a little bit of a mixed bag with Ratledge, and then Mahogany didn't work out quite as well. And then I'm glad you highlighted Muhammad, because people are looking at that as a failure on the defensive end side, but he was a good defensive end, and they just maybe need to layer in another guy or two, somebody that's a little more stout against the run. But it'll be interesting to follow the offseason. We'll be following them here every week. We'll have Billy back on to help us analyze things, but appreciate you joining the show, and want to make sure to highlight your work and direct the people to where they can follow you here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Yeah, Billy _Riccette, Riccette on Twitter, Lions Wire, Bengals Wire. Just started some work over at Roundtable as well, covering a couple teams there. So kind of all over the place here. But yeah, still doing some Lions work for sure. And yeah, would love to come back and chat with you guys, especially as we get through the off season. I'm really excited, especially for this draft. I think it's going to be a really intriguing one. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Definitely. We'll be doing a lot of draft coverage here. And I did see that you're writing for Bengals Wire now. So now we got a contact there, which is good. So, and
yes,
especially since the namesake on the show, that's his team that he's been most associated with here, Shayne Graham. So we had him on to cover the Bengals for us, and then he became a fixture. But we'll definitely have you back on, and appreciate you joining the show here. And we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Billy. Take care.